as we speak, they're shredding documents at USAID. Mike Benz joins us to address the level of concern. Inflation is at its lowest growth point in months. Our economic panel will tell us what it means. And we are on to the next phase of resolving the Russia-Ukraine war. Our OAN experts are in studio to discuss. All next on the Matt Gaetz Show. Let's do this. We're shaking up Washington, D.C. We're breaking the fever.
You ever watch this guy on television? It's like a machine. He's great. Matt Gaetz.
We've been telling you a lot about USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development. But if you listen to expert Mike Benz, USAID is less about saving the world and more about laundering your tax dollars through regime change side quests. USAID is more like the deep state's Kickstarter, overthrowing governments they don't like. If USAID shows up in your country, probably one of two things is going to happen. Either you're about to get a gay pride parade that you didn't want, or your president might slip and fall in the shower. Was USAID involved in regime change in Ukraine? In 2014, USAID was throwing money around in Ukraine like it was a bachelor party full of frat bros at a strip club, and suddenly the government got yeeted out of office. Some will call this the will of the people, but the $5 billion from the State Department may have been a contributing factor, according to some. The future of democracy promotion has to be better than USAID overthrowing governments and installing CIA-backed Starbucks in Kyiv. There's a common modus operandi that USAID uses. First, they fund activist groups that hate the government. Second, they call the protests organic with information warfare. Then, if the protests fail, they implement a coup for human rights. And ultimately, they'll install a leader who wants NATO and McDonald's and an IMF loan. Next thing you know, they've privatized your water supply. Your national flag has rainbow accents, and Hunter Biden is on the board of an energy company in your country. The pattern is rather recognizable. Democracy promotion in Venezuela meant sanctions until the economy collapsed, and then Biden enriching Maduro as his people starved. Promoting democracy in Syria meant having forces backed by the Pentagon fighting forces backed by the CIA. Did democracy promotion in Pakistan mean locking up Imran Khan? Free Imran Khan. Promoting democracy should mean promoting our own. And we don't do enough of that in America. It's not unreasonable to hope that U.S. foreign policy would be more stable than the Ripple coin in your wallet. USAID is not a charity. It's a nonprofit CIA. Your tax dollars aren't funding democracy, kind of like how FTX wasn't funding customer withdrawals. And if your country gets too friendly with China or Russia, expect an organic protest within the year. I love America. I just don't love the part where we use global regime change as a subscription model, spreading democracy one failed state at a time. Returning to the program to discuss is the Executive Director of the Foundation for Freedom Online, Mike Benz. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Again, why were they shredding papers at USAID recently?
Well, I initially described this as a five-alarm fire because the wording in the email that came from Erica Carr, who's the Executive Secretary at USAID and largely in charge of document retention issues, was someone who joined during the Obama administration and who was named that executive secretary position the first week of the Biden administration and kept over for Trump. And the language in the email was highly unusual. It was to have an all-day group event for shredding and burning documents, including documents in classified safes and personnel records. And the language included such colorful phrases as, when the shredders reserve the burn bags for when the shredders are so overloaded or overused that you have to, resort to the burn bags for them. And you've seen a lot of Democrats come out and say how unusual this is and filings for injunctive orders to stop this. What I was told after I escalated the issue from several people at USAID, people who I think are normally quite smart and on the ball about this, is that what they told me is that this is normal, ordinary course, disposal of paper records when you have insurances that digital duplicates have been provided, combined with the fact that USAID is shutting down in the process of actually leaving the building. And so at some point, these records need to be properly either disposed of or stored at any rate. My issue is I don't trust the normal process. We've seen what happens when you trust things to the digital footprint only. We saw this with Operation Crossfire Hurricane, where The phones were all wiped with an ordinary course normal system update. We saw this with the January 6th pipe bomber situation when they said the phone files ended up getting corrupted, and so they lost access to those. Paper records are extremely important to be able to have a true forensic record, and I'm not sure that I totally trust the situation where you are simply relying on the digital alone, especially because there's not going to be any new documents at USAid being produced in the near future of this caliber. And so I would like the most faithful forensic effort preserved. If I can just say one other thing, it's that another thing, a sort of assurance that I was given by folks at the agency was that USAID has a very limited number of USAID originated classified documents. The USAID administrator is able to classify documents, label them top secret, whatnot. But that most of the classified documents that are in these safes are originating from the State Department or the intelligence services or the Pentagon, and that they simply have paper records of those. I don't trust that either, because Samantha Power was probably the most crooked USAID administrator in the agency's history, which is saying a lot given that John Bolton was given the USAID Hand Grenade Award when he ran policy and budget there. And so we don't know how many documents Samantha Power classified that only USAID has effective access to. And I don't necessarily trust that everything has necessarily been uploaded into the digital realm where it could be accessed at a later time, given that we've seen the FBI play with these vault tricks before, as they did in the Whitey Bulger case.
Yeah, I like my ballots on paper. I like my evidence on paper. I get worried that if there's only digital storage, you could get bleach bit or whatever happened to the original video from the moon landing. Who knows where that actually went? But you've been sounding the alarm on USAID for quite some time, and I think that is one of the reasons why it became a central focus of DOGE, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's now largely being shut down. What I worry about is if during that shutdown, actions are taken that could prohibit the real accountability that has to happen on the other end. Who do you see as the principal entity? What, is it the FBI? Is it some other entity, the Inspector General, who can actually go in and expose the terrible things USAID was doing so that we're able to hold people accountable and then remediate any of the harm that might still be ongoing in the world?
I think Pete Morocco at State is a very capable person on this task. I know that he was apprised of these USAID corruption issues many, many months ago, before the scandal really broke in full. And I think that he, together with Marco Rubio, have their hands cut out for them. But frankly, I think a lot of this is just the process that's currently ongoing, which is that a combination of DOGE and the publication of the contracts with outside researchers who are just ordinary citizens who are just going into the USA spending database, going into the Data Republican database, and sketching all this out, I think will actually help a lot of the folks within the agencies to be able to see each of their individual ties to it. Because the fact is pretty much everything USAID does is interagency at some level. They're either helping the Pentagon or the Special Forces through the USAID Pentagon coordinating
or the CIA.
Or the CIA, or the State Department, or the NGOs underneath them, the NGO-plex. And so not only that, the record at USAID is basically the perfect partner map for all rogue operations, because whether it's with our own intelligence agencies gone awry or whether it's with foreign governments, USAID is a constant partner, for example, of perfidious British statecraft. It's a funder of the London universities. It's a funder of the British intelligence networks that control the information space from London. It's a funder of the German. It's a co-funder with projects from the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as Germany is teeing up together with NATO and the EU to go after Trump and Trump world allies. And so that record, I totally agree with you. It has to be clean and pristine, because that's a record dating back decades that can forensically reconstruct the support that's been given to unions in this country, for example, and universities, and to judge networks. We've seen half a dozen examples of judges who've been making these ridiculous decisions over the past several months, whose wives are running USAID projects and whatnot.
Well, it just looks
And
like a bribery slush fund. And then you can choose where to deploy the bribery assets, but that's really what it is. And frankly, that might be the best work it does, is the bribery slush fund, because the other stuff gets into downright weirdness. There is a constant battle going on in the courts regarding the authority of the executive branch to stop this harm. And it seems as though that's falling along the fault line of whether or not the funds have already been obligated. If they haven't been obligated, it seems as though there's robust Article 2 powers for the executive branch to stop the funding. If they have been obligated by contract, the courts seem to be saying that that money has to still flow through. What obligated contracts are out there that Mike Benz is most worried about the U.S. taxpayer continuing to fund?
So I would say that the funds that are outstanding predominantly relate to these long-term contracts, oftentimes or grants. Oftentimes these grants are 5-year grants that extend out, or 3 to 7 year grants that extend outward and proceed in tranches. And so you'll have a portion of that being these funds of the nature of what the Supreme Court just narrowly ruled have to be paid for past tranche activity. But you have the censorship work that's being done around the world through these USAID funded organizations that I'm extremely troubled by. I think there should be a full review of the funds that are given to unions and these trade labor groups, because I think that's one of these unexplored aspects of this story that comes home to America's shores. The largest recipient of Department of Labor International Affairs work, which is co-funded by USAID, is the AFL-CIO and its international branches. But the AFL-CIO is the largest union in the U.S. They're at war with Elon Musk over his lack of unionization of Tesla. They play an active role in these street protests. We saw an agreement that was referenced by Time magazine in the famous Molly Ball article between the AFL-CIO and the Chamber of Commerce about a shutting down the country with mass union walkouts and boycotts and street protests if Trump had won the Electoral College in 2020. And one of the things that my organization uncovered and that we've been talking about lately is that the Department of Labor's International Affairs Bureau has been giving the AFL-CIO's international branches tens of millions of dollars in regions all over the world, including to Brazil. The Biden administration paid something like $30 million to the unions in Brazil backing Lula. Lula ran the Workers' Party, which was entirely coordinated by unions. It was the AFL-CIO.
I mean, look, we'll cut to the chase. There are a lot of people in Central and South America who believe, but for USAID, Jair Bolsonaro would be the leader of Brazil right now. Do you assess it similarly?
I'm not only one of them. I think I'm effectively leading that charge. We have direct quotes that my foundation has found about people who participated in that censorship operation against Bolsonaro.
Sure, I think it's an organizing effort too. I don't think it's just a censorship effort. I think they literally paid money for the street combat of elections that goes into harvesting up ballots. I do want to ask you about where it stands with this government funding bill. As we're having this discussion, the Senate is contemplating taking up and passing a continuing resolution that President Trump supported, congressional Republicans supported. We've had Republican congressmen on this program like Tim Burchett, who have expressed concern that this CR could function as a supercharge for the leftist efforts to try to get the funds unlocked for USAID. Meanwhile, the White House has assured me directly that the CR will not do that DOJ will be able to continue its work. So as you assess this, and no one's watching it closer, do you think the CR has a constraint on DOJ or keeps the light on at DOJ to keep their work going?
Well, it'd be nice to be able to see it as soon as possible. One of the things that I think that was successful in modifying the previous CR was that, there was enough time notice for independent researchers to be able to look for all the crazy stuff in there. And then we saw a few of them that were just completely red line, hard line, cannot accept. Like, for example, the reauthorization of the Global Engagement Center, which really activated Elon Musk and ended up getting the whole bill sent back and cut back dramatically. And so I'm still a wait and see on it to see what, how the sausage exactly is being made on it. But the sooner that process can begin, I think the more educated people will be able to be to provide the appropriate pressure in order to make the modifications that are needed.
Mike Benz, you are the dragon slayer of USAID, and I greatly appreciate the investigative journalism you've done and also the advocacy that's brought people together around bringing down this very corrupt organization. Thanks for being on the program.
Thanks for your leadership, Matt.